I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who gets caught in a moment like that. You know the type? The kind of story you'd expect to hear third hand from a friend of a friend. Something vague and maybe a little exaggerated. But it happened to me, and it still messes with my head a little. It started like any other guy's trip. There were 4 of us. Me, Matt, Kyle, and Ben. We'd been friends since high school. And somehow, even after college and different jobs in different cities, we'd kept up the tradition of camping every summer. A long weekend, out in the woods, no cell service, too much beer, and just enough firewood to make us feel like rugged survivalists. We all had our roles. Kyle was the planner, the guy with the itinerary, the one who brought the tent stakes nobody else remembered. Ben was the chill one, always just vibing, usually high by nightfall. Matt was the wild card, and me, I was the one who pretended to be normal around them, the one who laughed along when the jokes got raunchy, the one who swallowed the way my stomach twisted a little differently when Matt changed shirts in front of me, who stared too long when he stretched, shirt riding up just enough to expose that patch of skin just above his waistband. Yeah, I was that guy. Quiet, polite, and deeply in the closet. At least when I was around them. Matt had always been the life of the group. Tall, cocky, broad-shouldered, with a crooked grin that made girls laugh and guys envy him. He'd played football in high school, but never took it too seriously. He was charming in that offhand way, like he didn't even know he was hot. And for years, I'd done everything I could to ignore the fact that my heart beat a little faster whenever he slung an arm around me or called me bro. So when he suggested we all go up to his uncle's property in the Adirondacks this year, a remote patch of woods by a lake, complete with a tiny dock and 0 cell reception, I agreed without thinking. We drove up Friday morning, music blasting, windows down. It was stupidly hot, the kind of humid August day where your shirt sticks to your back the second you step outside. By the time we got to the site, all 4 of us were sweaty and cranky, but the lake made up for it. We set up camp, cracked open some beers, and jumped in the water to cool off. Everything felt easy. That night, we built a fire and cooked burgers. Kyle passed around some whiskey he'd brought, and we ended up telling dumb stories and roasting each other like it was 2014 again. At some point, Ben passed out in a hammock, and Kyle wandered off to the lake, muttering something about stars and needing to piss, which left me and Matt by the fire, both of us buzzing from the alcohol, staring into the flames like idiots. "You ever think about how weird it is," Matt said, poking the fire with a stick, "that we've known each other this long and never once punched each other in the face?" I laughed. "I've come close. You've said some dumb shit over the years." "Yeah," he grinned. "Still do." There was a beat of silence. I was trying not to look at him too hard, even though the firelight made his face look unfairly good. Golden and sharp-edged, like something out of a movie. Then he looked at me and said, "You ever think about how it's kind of wild we never, spent time with the same girl? You and me." "Not once," I blinked. "What?" "You know, back in college, I had this theory that we'd both end up with the same taste eventually. You're picky, though. You never really went for the party girls." "Neither did you, really," I said. He tilted his head. "True. I guess I just assumed we'd end up competing over someone. You know, like in a movie." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "I don't think we have the same type." He gave me a weird look. "No?" I shook my head. "Nah, I don't really go for girls like that." Matt didn't say anything for a second, just looked at me, the fire crackling between us. Then he smirked, tossed the stick into the flames, and stood up. "Come on," he said. "Let's crash. I'm getting eaten alive out here." I followed him to the tent we were sharing, 2 sleeping bags laid out side by side. Kyle and Ben had theirs in a second tent, a little farther away. I had a quick internal panic as I climbed into mine, too aware of how close Matt was going to be, how little space there really was between us. He kicked off his shoes, peeled off his shirt, and flopped down with a groan. "God, my back is killing me. You still suck at packing." "You're welcome for carrying the cooler," I muttered, trying not to look at the curve of his shoulder in the dim light. "You know I love you for that," he said lazily. And then, right as I was settling in, zipping my bag halfway, he reached over and punched me lightly on the arm. "No homo, though." I looked at him, blinking. "What?" He grinned, closing his eyes. You know, just in case. For the record, no homo. He said it like a joke, like guys do, that casual frat boy tone, but the way he said it, slow, almost deliberate, stuck with me. Right? I said, laying back, heart suddenly pounding. But that wasn't the part that changed everything. It was what he did about an hour later, when the fire was just embers and the tent had gone quiet. When I was half asleep and felt the softest touch against my arm, I thought I was dreaming at first, but I wasn't. And what he did next. Yeah, that's when everything shifted. At first, I thought I was dreaming, that weird in-between stage of sleep where your brain tries to make sense of random sensations. Like maybe the brush of skin on skin was just part of a half-forgotten memory, or the whiskey still playing tricks on my mind. But I wasn't dreaming. Matt's hand was on my forearm, barely touching me, his fingers just resting there like he was testing something, like he was waiting. I held my breath, heart pounding in my chest, trying not to move, trying not to react. Because what the hell was this? Was he still asleep? Sleepwalking? Drunk? Playing a prank? Then his fingers slid down, slow, tracing over my wrist. Not rough, not teasing, gentle, like intimate. I stared at the roof of the tent, counting the slow rise and fall of my breath, pretending I was still asleep. My body was tense, locked up, like one twitch might shatter whatever weird moment was happening. But then he did something that made my stomach flip and my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. He moved closer. Just a few inches at first. I felt the shift of the air before I felt his breath on the side of my neck. Warm, steady, too steady for someone who was asleep. He knew what he was doing. I swallowed hard. I still hadn't moved. My hands were clenched in the sleeping bag, gripping the lining like it was the only thing keeping me from floating out of my body. Then, and I swear this part is burned into my brain forever, Matt leaned in and whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "You still awake?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was dry, my tongue glued to the roof of my mouth. He waited. Then, even quieter, "You are. I can feel it." I finally turned my head, just slightly, and there he was. His face barely a foot from mine in the dark. Eyes open. Not drunk. Not asleep. Awake, watching me. I whispered, "What are you doing?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked to my lips, then back up. His voice was soft, almost like he was embarrassed. "I don't know." He was so close I could smell the campfire smoke in his hair. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind was racing in circles, trying to understand what the hell was going on. "This is stupid," he mumbled, pulling back a bit, like he was about to roll away. And maybe he would have. Maybe I would have let him. But then I did something I didn't think I'd ever do. I reached out and caught his wrist. Just held it there. Lightly. Barely touching. But enough to stop him. The look he gave me. Wide-eyed. Vulnerable. Nothing like the cocky grin he usually wore. It hit me like a punch to the gut. "You don't have to pretend," I said quietly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Matt stared at me for a long time. I could hear the wind outside the tent, the rustle of leaves, the faint creak of the trees. It was like the whole world had gone silent, waiting for what he'd say next. Then he leaned in again. Slower this time, more sure. And he kissed me. Just once. Just a soft press of his lips against mine. When he pulled back, he whispered it again like a reflex. "No homo." But this time he didn't laugh. He just looked at me, searching my face like he didn't know what he'd just done. And I whispered back, "Yeah, okay." Even though we both knew that was a lie. We laid there in the dark for what felt like forever. Our shoulders touching. Neither of us saying anything. My mind was a mess, full of questions and heat and confusion and want. Then, slowly, he reached for my hand under the sleeping bag, laced our fingers together. Didn't say a word, just held on. I didn't sleep much after that. Not because of what happened. Well, yeah, partly because of that. But mostly because I was lying there with Matt's hand still in mine. Our bodies pressed close in a sleeping bag that suddenly felt way too small for the size of what had just changed between us. He didn't say anything else after that kiss. Neither did I. And maybe that was the safest choice. It felt fragile, like if either of us spoke, the whole thing might collapse in on itself. Eventually, I felt his breathing slow, steady, calm. He drifted off holding my hand like it was nothing. Like this wasn't the most confusing, most intense night of my life. I laid there, eyes open, staring at the shadows of the trees against the tent walls, my brain looping every second back in slow motion. His voice, his lips, the way he said no homo like it would undo what had just happened, like it could unmake the way his mouth moved against mine, like it could erase the way his fingers curled around mine, like they belonged there. I must have dozed off for an hour or two. When I woke up, sunlight was pushing through the nylon of the tent, and Matt was gone. Just gone. His sleeping bag was still there, a crumpled mess of fabric and warmth, but he wasn't in it. My heart lurched. I pulled on a hoodie and unzipped the tent. Outside, the air was crisp, that early morning chill that comes before the heat kicks in. The fire pit was cold. Kyle and Ben were still asleep in their tent. And then I spotted Matt down by the lake, skipping stones across the glassy surface. Shirtless, barefoot, wearing the same mesh shorts from the night before. I stood there for a minute, trying to read his posture from a distance. He didn't look tense, just focused. Calm even. Then he turned, saw me, and his face did nothing. No grin, no wink. No, hey man. Just a nod, like this was any other morning. I walked down the slope toward him, heart banging like a drum in my chest. I was expecting something. A joke, a shrug, even an apology. What I didn't expect was him speaking first. "Did you sleep okay?" I blinked. Yeah, I guess." He nodded, like that was the end of it. But I couldn't let it go. I stepped a little closer, crossing my arms over my chest to keep warm. "Matt, are we gonna talk about last night?" He didn't look at me, just skipped another rock. It made 4 bounces before disappearing. "There's nothing to talk about," he said. I stared at him. "You kissed me," he shrugged. "Yeah, and then said no homo like that makes it, what, not real?" Matt finally turned to me, and his expression was unreadable, something between defensiveness and panic. "Dude, I was just messing around. We were drunk. You were into it, I figured." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I didn't mean to make it a thing." "A thing?" I repeated, my voice flat. "You held my hand all night." He looked at me then. Really looked. And for a second, something cracked in his expression. Guilt? Fear? I don't know. "I didn't want you to feel weird," he said, softer now. "So I said it. I thought maybe it'd make it easier." I took a step back, not because I was angry, but because I was overwhelmed. My chest was tight, and not from the cold. "Easier for who, Matt?" He didn't answer. We stood there in silence. The morning breeze rustling the trees, the lake perfectly still, except for the ripple of his last skipped stone. Then he sighed and sat down on a nearby log, head in his hands. "I don't know what I'm doing," he muttered. "I just know I didn't want to sleep in my own tent last night. I wanted to be next to you." I stared at him. "Why?" He looked up, and his voice was quiet, raw. "Because I feel safer around you than I do with anyone else." That hit me harder than any kiss ever could have. We were both quiet after that. And in that quiet, I realized something. Maybe Matt didn't have the words for what he was feeling. Maybe he didn't have a label. Maybe he wasn't ready to own anything yet. But that didn't make what happened any less real. And I'd have to decide what I was willing to wait for. or if I was going to let this moment pass like it meant nothing. After Matt said that I feel safer around you than anyone else, I didn't know what to say. I think I stood there like an idiot for a full minute, trying to figure out if he meant it the way I hoped, or if it was just another emotionally confused guy trying to make sense of a moment he wasn't ready to face. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way he looked at me. Like he wanted to say more, but didn't trust himself to. Like he was balancing on a cliff edge, and even one wrong word might make him pull back completely. So I sat down next to him, not touching, just sitting, watching the lake, pretending I wasn't hyper aware of the space between us. The silence felt full, but not in a bad way. It was like we both knew something big had happened, something that didn't need to be said just yet. Matt sighed beside me, rubbing the back of his neck. "You gonna tell the guys?" The question hit harder than I expected. I shook my head slowly. "Tell them what? That you kissed me and then panic exited the emotional atmosphere?" He chuckled, low and tired. "You make it sound like I ejected from a jet." "You kinda did." We both laughed, a little too long, a little too nervously, but it helped. It broke the tension, even just a little. Matt turned toward me slightly, elbows on his knees. "I'm not trying to be a foul man. Last night, it felt good, and that scared the shit out of me." I looked at him, really looked. "It felt good for me too. That's why I can't pretend it didn't happen." He nodded, biting his lip. "Yeah, I know." A long pause. He exhaled hard. I've never done anything like that before. With a guy, I mean. "I figured," I said quietly. "I didn't think I wanted to." I was quiet. But then I was in that tent with you, and it was just, I don't know, like my brain shut off and my body went, "This feels right." That time, I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He glanced at me again. "But I still don't know what the hell it means." "You don't have to know right now," I said. "You just have to stop pretending it didn't happen." Matt nodded again. Then, without looking at me, he said it, almost too quietly to hear. "I didn't say no homo because I wanted to joke. I said it because I was scared that if I didn't, I'd have to deal with the fact that I liked it." My heart jumped. And just like that, something inside me shifted. Not in a dramatic, world-flipping way, but like this slow realization that maybe this wasn't some fluke or drunken accident. Maybe it was real, and maybe he felt it too. We sat like that for a while, just letting the lake breeze brush past us, letting the quiet stretch out again. Eventually, we heard rustling from the other tent. Ben and Kyle starting to stir. The moment dissolved like morning mist. Matt stood up, brushing off his shorts. "We should get breakfast going before Kyle freaks out over his missing protein bars." I nodded, standing up too. "Yeah, wouldn't want him to get hangry." Matt hesitated, just for a second, then looked at me again. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. "You?" He gave me a half smile. "Ask me again tonight." The rest of the day was almost normal. Too normal, maybe. We hiked, fished. Kyle found a broken paddleboard and insisted on trying to fix it with duct tape and prayer. Ben got stoned and started naming every tree we passed, most of which were wrong. It was stupid and fun and familiar in the best way. But underneath it, I could feel the shift. Matt kept glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd linger near me longer than usual. His touches, casual, easy, quick, were more frequent. Not enough for the others to notice. But I did. At one point, we were all down by the lake, throwing a frisbee around shirtless, drinking beers. Matt tackled me into the water after a play, like he'd done 100 times before. But this time, when he surfaced beside me, laughing and slick with lake water, he looked at me in a way that made my skin heat up in a completely different way. "Still got it," he smirked, water dripping down his chest. "Barely," I muttered, trying not to stare. He didn't move away. Just grinned and said quietly, "You smell like campfire and soap. And you smell like a wet dog." He laughed and swam off, but that moment stayed with me all day. Something was changing, and I wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. That night, things came to a head. We were back at the fire pit after dinner, the four of us stretched out on logs and camp chairs. Kyle was deep into his third beer and holding court, with a wild story about a girl he met at Coachella who might have been a pickpocket. Ben was half asleep already, legs stretched out by the fire, hoodie pulled over his face. Matt sat across from me, beer in hand, eyes glowing orange from the firelight. He looked relaxed, too relaxed, but I could tell he was watching me from under his lashes. Every time I glanced up, he was already looking away. We hadn't talked alone since that moment by the lake. Not really. We'd been circling it all day, orbiting each other like planets not ready to collide. But something had shifted between us. And now, in the quiet hum of night, it was building again. Kyle stood up around 11, muttering something about needing to piss and not trusting the woods. Ben mumbled that he was going to pass out, then wandered off toward the tents. It was just me and Matt after that. The fire had burned low, just glowing coals now. The air was cool, and the only sound was the lake lapping at the shore and the occasional crack of the embers. Matt cleared his throat. You ever feel like there's a version of you just waiting to be let out? I looked up at him. Yeah, all the time. He nodded slowly. I think I met mine last night. That stopped me. He looked over, serious now, not smirking, not hiding. I'm not gonna say I understand everything. I'm still figuring shit out. But when I kissed you, that didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel like some oops moment. I didn't say anything. Just let him talk. I've never done that with a guy before, he went on. But it wasn't about you being a guy. It was about you being you. I swallowed, heart pounding in my ears. Then why'd you say no homo after? He winced a little. Habit, fear, I don't know. It was a defense thing. Stupid, I get that. I didn't want to ruin this. Any of this. You didn't, I said. But pretending like it didn't mean anything, that would. He nodded. Yeah, you're right. He stood up suddenly and walked over to where I was sitting, dropping down onto the log beside me. Not close enough to touch, but closer than before. I keep thinking about last night, about holding your hand, about falling asleep like that. He glanced sideways at me. I didn't want to let go. There it was. The thing he hadn't said all day. I turned slightly toward him. You don't have to let go, but you can't keep doing this half in, half out thing either. I'm not going to be your secret. I'm not asking you to be, he said quickly. I don't know how to be this yet. That's okay, I said. You don't have to have it figured out. But you have to be honest. Matt looked down at his hands for a second, then back up at me. I want to be close to you, not just in the tent, not just when no one's looking. My chest tightened. Then show me. He leaned in slowly, slower than the night before, and this time I met him halfway. The kiss wasn't nervous like the first. It wasn't rushed or hidden. It was warm and steady, like we were both trying to memorize what it felt like we were finally letting go of whatever we'd been afraid of. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I'm not gonna say no homo this time, he whispered. Good, I whispered back, because that was extremely homo. We both laughed, quiet and breathless, and for the first time all trip, I felt completely calm. Matt took my hand again, lacing our fingers together, and we sat there watching the coals burn down, not caring who might see. The next morning wasn't awkward. That surprised me. We woke up late, sunlight already leaking through the tent and warming the fabric, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to pretend. Matt was lying beside me, his arm draped lazily over his eyes, one leg kicked out from the sleeping bag. He looked peaceful. When I moved, he blinked and turned toward me. Hair a mess, voice raspy. You snore. I raised an eyebrow. I do not. You do, he grinned. Like, low-key adorable snoring, but it's there. I think that's slander. Matt just laughed and rolled over onto his back, stretching with a groan. Man, I slept better than I have in weeks. I sat up and zipped open the tent, letting the cool morning air wash in. That makes one of us. I kept waking up wondering if I was going to open my eyes and find you on the other side of the campground. He paused, then sat up too, resting his elbows on his knees. Hey, he said seriously. I'm not running. Not this time. I looked over at him. I mean it, he added. I don't know what this is yet, but I'm not pretending it didn't happen, and I'm not going to make you feel like it's just some random camping thing. That meant more than I expected. He didn't say boyfriend, he didn't say us, but he didn't push it away either. And maybe that was enough. For now, we joined the others at the fire pit like it was any normal day. Kyle was burning breakfast sausage because he'd accidentally put down a full beer before cooking. Ben was still wearing the same hoodie he slept in, squinting like a vampire at the sun. Matt sat beside me. Not weird, not distant, just there. He didn't touch me in front of them, but his knees stayed close to mine under the picnic table. Our arms brushed once, and he didn't flinch. And when I passed him a water bottle, our fingers touched and lingered for just a second longer than necessary. No one said anything. Later that day, we all went for a hike. Kyle insisted on leading even though he'd left the map at camp and claimed he memorized the route. Predictably, we got lost for 40 minutes and had to loop back. Matt stuck close to me the whole time, cracking jokes, stealing glances. At one point, when the others had gone ahead to scope out the trail, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me behind a thick patch of ferns. Do you ever think about what happens after this? He asked. I blinked. You mean like after the weekend? Yeah. He looked down, toeing the dirt with his shoe. Like, we go back to our lives. You go back to your city. I go back to mine. Do we just forget this? I didn't answer right away. I don't want to, he added quickly. I want to see you again. Like, not just in a tent or around a fire. I stepped a little closer. I don't want to forget it either. He looked up at me then, that same flicker of uncertainty still in his eyes. Then maybe we don't have to. Before I could say anything else, we heard Kyle yelling from up ahead. Something about finding a bear, or maybe just a squirrel with a bad attitude. We burst out laughing and jogged to catch up. That night, our last night at camp, we made a huge dinner and stayed up late playing cards by lantern light. There was something warm and easy in the air, like we all knew this trip was a memory already being written. When it came time to turn in, Ben and Kyle went to their tent, still arguing over who cheated at poker. Matt and I stayed behind for a few minutes. The fire was low again, just glowing coals. I was staring at them when he said softly, "You coming?" I turned to him. Yeah. We walked back to the tent together, and this time, when he crawled in beside me, there was no hesitation, no need for words. He slid into the sleeping bag with me like it was second nature now, like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. And just before we fell asleep, his voice floated through the dark. "No homo," he whispered, "just to be an ass." I elbowed him in the ribs. Then he added, quieter, "Okay, maybe a little homo." I smiled into the dark. "Yeah," I said, "I'm okay with that." We packed up the next morning in that bittersweet way you do after a good trip. Everything smelling like campfire, bodies sore but satisfied, the air heavy with the kind of silence that says, nobody really wants to go back yet. Kyle and Ben were too busy arguing over how to fold the tents the right way to notice anything unusual between Matt and me, and maybe nothing was that unusual. We weren't suddenly holding hands in broad daylight or sneaking kisses behind trees, but something had changed. Matt kept glancing over at me, and every time our eyes met, he'd smile. Small, crooked, but real. We drove back in 2 cars, Kyle with Ben, me with Matt. When we hit the highway, the music came on low, the kind of slow alt-rock stuff Matt always pretended not to like, but knew the lyrics to anyway. It was quiet for a while, just the wind and the road. Then he spoke. I meant what I said, you know? I looked over. He had one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gear shift. I don't want this to be some isolated, we were in the woods, and things got confusing story. It wasn't confusing, I said. He nodded. Yeah, that's the thing. It wasn't. We were quiet again for a bit. Then he added, You think you'd want to come down to visit next month? I could show you around my place. Maybe introduce you to a few friends. That stopped me. Introduce me as what? I asked. Matt glanced over, and for once, there was no joking in his voice. As someone I'm figuring things out with, someone I care about. My stomach flipped. In a good way. I could do that, I said. He smiled, then reached over and let his fingers brush against mine on the center console. Just a light touch. But it was enough. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of normal life and quiet anticipation. We texted constantly, more than we ever had before, sending dumb memes, music recs, late night "you up?" messages that weren't about something intimate but something softer. Matt didn't always have the right words, but he was trying. He asked questions, he shared things, he listened. And I realized I didn't need him to be perfect. I just needed him to be honest. The next time I saw him, he met me at the train station with 2 coffees and a nervous smile. You're here, he said, like he hadn't believed it until I stepped off the platform. I'm here. That weekend, we didn't hide. We didn't come out to everyone. We didn't make any grand announcements. But we didn't lie either. And when his roommate came home unexpectedly and saw us curled up on the couch, Matt didn't flinch. He just said, "This is my friend," with a tone that said there was more to it. And his roommate, bless him, just nodded and said, "Cool, you guys want Thai?" We said yes. That night, as we lay in his bed, limbs tangled, breath warm against each other's skin, Matt whispered into the dark, "I don't know what I am yet, but I know this feels right." I kissed his shoulder and replied, "That's enough for me." So yeah, that night in the tent, it wasn't just a fluke. It wasn't just a kiss or a dare or a drunk mistake wrapped in a no homo defense mechanism. It was the start of something. Something messy. Something real. Something I didn't see coming. And maybe someday, when Matt finally stops using no homo as a security blanket, we'll laugh about it. Actually, we already do. Because now, every time he pulls me in close, kisses my neck, or grabs my hand in public, he leans in and whispers with a grin, "Definitely homo." And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way.